Hello, welcome to another Ghost Ship Below Decks video. I more than ever, I just felt the feeling of like switching on when I pressed recording, of like switching myself onto YouTuber brain, and I don't like it. I feel like I'm losing a part of myself. Anyway, so this Below Decks was definitely teased and sort of mentioned beforehand by Aaron wanting to do some kind of character reveal. I wouldn't call it that in full. I do think this, however, is a consecration of the four classes that are going to be the focus of Rokor's early access launch. I think we are in the situation where Rokor is going to launch with four, and they're putting all their cards into these four. They're going to use them as sort of the platform for the design of the Reclaimers. And then once that's been sort of locked in, more classes can come like in post-launch updates. Not necessarily post 1.0. I think we'll definitely get more classes before 1.0. I'm banking on 2 to 4. I'm banking on the count of classes when we go 1.0, which is probably like in 2027 or something, to be honest. But I'm counting on the count of classes being probably 6 or 8 when we go 1.0. But I think it will be 4 on early access launch, because it's just, I think it keeps things a bit simpler for them. It's a number that they're comfortable with, but I do hope that they understand that I think breaking that mold is important for separating the two games. I don't think they should get too comfortable with only having 4 classes in Rokor, because I think Rokor, just in terms of differentiating itself, demands more than 4. And by nature of the classes, I think they definitely want more than 4, because they can do so much with the classes, because they are much more simple platforms for much more interesting upgrades. And we're going to see a lot of that in this Below Decks post, but it is really about also constructing the identity of the Reclaimers, but more specifically the Gauntlets themselves, which represent the class abilities. So let's get into Below Decks at Ghost Ship, designing the Reclaimers Gauntlets, shaping the look, sound, and feel of Rokor's high-tech tactical weaponry. Hello Reclaimers, it's time to talk about technology! Perhaps you saw our post yesterday on April 1st, teasing the new Reclaimer Gauntlets. If the date alone did not clue you in, that video was an April Fool's goof. It's pre-rendered footage, not in-game or in-engine, and nothing in it besides the Gauntlet is going in the game. So I'll talk about that in a minute. I think I should probably get through up to this point. The video was initially meant to be a simple little showcase of the Reclaimer Gauntlets for this Below Decks article, but as often happens at GSG, with a lot of silly ideas and no grown-ups were around to tell us to knock it off. Except all of you. You're all grown-ups. Just in case you needed a reminder. Thus, a goofy video was born. Buried among those goofs, however, are some pretty cool aspects of art direction and animation that deserve a more serious discussion. So yeah, what it is pre-rendered, I do believe that the animations are still real animations that are going to make it into the game, or at least currently are in the game. So it's time to take a look at the design process behind some of the fancy new gear you'll be able to use in Rokor. This is more than a showcase of neat tech though, it's also an exploration of visual language and art direction in computer games. How do you get a cluster of pixels to stir up the feelings you're after? Good questions, but I'm going to quickly skim through this video. So this obviously, yeah, it was an April Fool's video, but the gauntlets themselves are sort of an official reveal in a way of sort of abilities and animations that can be used in Rokor. However, I didn't make a video on this video itself, because it was an April Fool's video. I kind of just thought it best to stay clear, and I knew that the Below Decks was coming tomorrow anyway, so I thought it best to wait till then for whatever clarification was needed. I'm not going to play this in full. I'm kind of going to skim through this a lot, so we can ignore that. So there they are.
Anyone crowding your personal stew. And for more emphatic crowd management.
So this one, yeah, Stonewall, which is for the Guardian class.
Push back anyone crowding your personal stew. And for more emphatic crowd management, it can also generate an energy barrier that keeps any nosy neighbor at bay. But that's not all. It's also capable of directed energy attacks in case you really need to get your point across.
So that kind of showcases the functionality of the Stonewall, which is the Guardian's like ability gauntlet, basically. And yeah, a lot of that is not going to be exactly how it feels in game. I doubt we're going to be able to sort of shock, like basically blast enemies apart like that, unless they really go all in on like a ragdoll dismemberment system. But yeah, it's basically you can create shields and basically produce force blasts. So it all sounds good. It sounds like a really fun sort of aggressive tank like style of gameplay is what I kind of imagine it as. Yeah, so let's take a look, get quickly too. Oh, it goes pretty quickly through them, actually, to be honest.
The
There's the
Special
spotter.
Purpose Operations Tactical Tranquilizing and Enfeebling Repeater, or spotter,
For the
short,
spotter
is a
class, in this
rapid-fire,
case.
pneumatically operated burst fire dart, 8 caliber ballistic syringes containing weakening and disorienting chemical agents. They will be left in a state of confusion, so you can hit him with even stronger attack.
Don't just look for the easy targets, make your own.
The Buzzard drone.
So the spotter is like a basically marked for death, but a class, which is a perfectly fine idea. I think it's going to be sort of the scout substitute in a way, and will basically do what marked for death does, but on like a grander scale and with much more sort of a lot more flourishes, a lot more elaboration through upgrades and whatnot. So I'm actually excited to see where that goes, given that it's quite a familiar mechanic already. Not that Buzzard actually isn't, so this is actually for the Falconeer.
Is a semi-autonomous offensive disruption device. An armored shell launch platform, this defensive weapon can be deployed with a flick of the wrist, and it comes with easily rechargeable internal batteries. Bring some shock and awe into the fight.
So that animation there is very much so not accurate, as far as we know from the previous showcase of these classes, actually, because we did see the Falconeer and the Slicer. Actually, have they changed the Slicer? I don't think they've changed the Slicer's name. This thing does shoot like electric blasts basically as it flies around enemies. It's not really a melee drone or anything like that. Anyway, let's quickly move on to that.
The blade. But now
Yeah.
you can strap those lifetimes of lethal knowledge right to your arm. Introducing the Supernova wrist-mounted energy sword.
For the Slicer.
Refined exponite crystals are superheated and magnetically suspended in a razor-sharp energy field. With the ultimate fighting technology. You don't have to settle for mastering the blade. You can become the blade. Order now, and not only do you get...
So that kind of showcases the Slicer a little bit. Obviously, once again, that's probably not exactly how it's going to work, but what we do know about it is a shitload of damage, and it actually does carve through terrain, which is why I kind of see the Slicer as the driller stand-in. Guardian being gunner, then Falconeer being engineer. I think that actually lines up quite well, I think. But it's still a cool showcase. This is stuff we'll be talking about on the podcast as well this Saturday. But yeah, obviously the article goes into what these actually are a lot more. So let's actually get into it. Let's get into it. Reclaimer disclaimer, everything below is a work in progress. We know. We can't promise that all or any. Don't say or any. I think it's just stupid that there's you need more conviction than that, I think. There's a lot of good stuff here, and most of it should make it to the game, I think. That all or any of it will make it into the game exactly as it's described. I mean, okay, exactly as described is fair. This will just give you a look at what we're working on at the moment. Now, I'm pretty sure this image basically has no sort of follow-up. Because I don't think this is meant to be a helmet. I think this is part of whatever this machine is. And I think we did see actually a glimpse of this machine in actually the small snippet of the upcoming trailer that was in the trailer for the III Initiative broadcast. Anyway, dress code tactical. Early discussions about Rogue Corps Reclaimers established them as a sort of elite shock troop, literally Deep Rock ODSTs, in the employ of Deep Rock Galactic, with a more military essence than your working miners. It's only natural that they'd have access to an arsenal of more advanced high-tech equipment. But what exactly should that look like? One of the critical parts of art direction in the early phase of development was nailing down some central design principles for the game's visuals. These help us capture the look and feel we want, but also to make sure everything in the game seems like a convincing part of the same world. Casper Olsen is a 2D/3D artist at Ghost Ship Games, whose main focus these past months has been designing equipment and weapons for the Reclaimers. As he explains, there's an important balancing act in making Rogue Corps visually distinct enough to stand out as its own game, but still having it all fit into the DRG low-poly universe. The Reclaimers' gear departs from the DRG aesthetics, which tends to be blockier and more cubic, Casper says. We're obviously keeping the low-poly design philosophy, but we're going for a sleeker look here. More triangular and pointy. It's a lot like modern stealth tech, but more flashy and sci-fi. Perfect, I think. Like Casper says, the art team took a lot of design cues from stealth jets and naval vessels. I think that also applies to the Ramrod itself, which is the Reclaimer's ship, as a submarine. A good example is the weapons bay on a fighter jet like the F-22. What's this going to link to? I see. A sleek, seamless form that can expand and separate, exposing faceted edges and a mess of high-tech gear within. That sentence was incredible. I love this. Just writing-wise. Like syntactically, basically. Casper's first challenge was figuring out how to translate that look into the DRG universe. To do that, he started with a style statement, a piece of gear that captures all the principles we've been talking about and demonstrates how they'd work in-game. That statement piece ended up being the barrier drone, a portable piece of tech deployed at the start of each mission to open up the grey out barrier, enclosing the mine sites and allow the reclaimers to pass through. The drone was something of a test platform, as its design and animations helped set the tone for the reclaimers and the rest of their gear. The team liked the drone, which was Casper's green light to move on. Next up, the Reclaimers Gauntlets. So what did they say it was called? The barrier drone. That's what this thing is, I'm pretty sure. As in, let's just say, I think that's fair to assume, actually. And so this is a thing you have to deploy to open the barrier. So the barrier doesn't just open. I assume this thing sends out some kind of pulse or signal that just destabilizes the barrier and creates an opening. That makes sense to me. Sounds like a cool way to do it. I assume that'll be function something like some kind of deep rock, timed event. We probably will be attacked while setting it up. We'll just have to see though. Here the gauntlet lined up very nicely on their podiums. I actually really like this shot. I think it's very nice. The gear makes the dwarf. Each reclaimer's got their own gauntlet, which is a wrist-mounted weapon with a special ability. As a class-specific item, it's got an important role in defining the character. After all, this piece of kit is almost always in your field of view because it's strapped to your arm. It's the most consistent visual reminder of who you are, which makes sense because it's not going to change. Obviously, your weapons might change, but that gauntlet will stay the same. It shouldn't be so flashy that it hogs the spotlight, but when you do activate it, it should make a clear statement of who your character is and what you're about. It'd be a missed opportunity if this equipment didn't telegraph that information in an interesting way. But what does the gear need to say? Well, here's our aims and inspirations for the 4 current playable classes in Rogue Core. So yeah, this is actually stuff I really want to get into, and I did not read this article in detail before. I kind of just looked through it to see what it was about, because I don't mind going in blind, basically. Anyway, Guardian, tanky shield character. Everything about the Guardian ought to be chunky, bulky, and robust, focused on power over speed. Hell yeah. Spotter, more techie, nimble, and tactical. As a character focused on weakening and critical damage, it makes sense to emphasize precision tech and stealthiness. Falconeer deploys a sweet robotic bird drone. Casper looked at the real-life clothes of Mongolian eagle hunters and adapted that for sleek, futuristic tech. That's sick. I love that sort of design statement. Slicer, his energy sword is just complete dazzle of busy bullshit, Casper says. I looked at mech animes for that. They've got all sorts of tech that make no sense at all, but looks amazing. And yeah, that's kind of how it goes. I think, well, actually, we'll get into the rule of cool in just a minute, but I think this does actually demonstrate what I said quite well. How you can actually see these as kind of stand-ins for the Deep Rock classes, or rather expansions on, or the Reclaimer version of the Deep Rock classes. The biggest stretch, obviously, I think is definitely the Slicer to the Driller, but in terms of mapping them, it's the closest. There's also sort of the quote here indicating of the sort of the craziness aspect. It's just kind of this nuts, like nut job warrior, basically, which is kind of how a lot of people see the Driller out of the 4 Deep Rock classes. So yeah, I really like these sort of character statements. I think we'll get into those on the podcast when sort of thinking about our which ones we gravitate towards the most. I think I probably know where Tyler's gonna land as far as these 4 go. But yeah, Guardian, Spotter, Slicer, Falconeer. As you can see, cool comes in many different flavours, and each character's equipment and animations have to reflect a unique type of cool. When these abilities are so central to your character, the equipment needs to be more than just a gun that goes pew. I want them to have more juice than that, Casper says. As a player, this equipment should reward you with a ton of snappy movement and cool tech when you use it. There should be a sort of catharsis each time, like, oh yeah, I can finally use my ability again, this looks sweet. Making you say hell yeah is an important goal of this stuff, but all this design has a direct gameplay purpose as well. When your equipment is interesting and satisfying to use, it rewards you for using it as often as possible, thereby encouraging you to play to your character's strengths. And to reinforce that reward feedback, it's not enough to look the part, the gear has to sound the part too. Yeah, I kind of love everything about this. It's got really the animation. The first-person animations have got big Doom vibes. The way Doom guy sort of interacts with his own equipment, I really like. I love the design too. I love the. It seems like the spotter is belt fed as well. It has sort of this just tube, I guess, that feeds it the darts just from like probably on your back or something where the ammo is stored. I think everything about it is great. The animations themselves feel punchy and satisfying, and the sound effects are gorgeous. Gungoose. Shape, sound, and motion. Designing the gear to fit the character is just the first step. After that, there's the question of making sure it moves and sounds how you'd expect. We've got instinctive expectations for how certain objects should feel. You've probably played a game where you pick up some heavy weapon like a sledgehammer, but you're able to swing it around like it's filled with helium. Something's off. If an object's animation doesn't convey the right sense of weight and heft, it starts to feel out of place. Okay, so this is actually promising stuff. This sort of self-awareness about the rule of cool. Stuff does need to make sense also to be cool. Cool is cool in terms of just designing shit that looks cool, but the moment it clearly makes absolutely no sense relative to its sort of context, its media, where it's actually placed, the moment it doesn't make sense even within that, it immediately becomes uncool. So if our Guardian is a blocky, tanky shield character, how do those qualities need to shine through in his gear, and how it moves? How do you run when you're wearing a chunky power arm as opposed to lightweight boots? Casper has to run through different considerations for each character, and it does make me feel that they really are going down into like a character route with roll call, which is why more than 4 classes is the expectation. One thing is coming up with the design and making a 3D model, but it's also figuring out how they move, how snappy, what shape they fold out into. Is there a wind up like a minigun or a big laser? Or is this quick and sharp like flicking out a switchblade? While he puts his animations together, he also does some rudimentary sound design to go with them. It's placeholder stuff, nothing that'll make it to the final game, but the rough blockout gives Ghost Ship game sound designers a more specific idea of the feeling we're aiming for. For Casper, the design process needs to consider shape, sound, and motion all together, as it should. Designing this stuff needs to give us a holistic, I love that word, understanding of how the gear works, how it feels, and how the player's ability fits into the game design. It's this interplay of the movement of the character itself and their gear, he says. All these small parts add up to support what kind of character this is supposed to be. Yeah, just perfect. And once again, I love the word holistic. It's such a useful word. Also, I don't like this, but I would love to get this hat in Deep Rock, though. Why not? I don't know what the point of this is, though. The rule of cool, here we go. Casper's design philosophy follows the rule of cool. If it looks cool but doesn't necessarily make sense in real life, who cares? It just needs to look cool. That's true. Real life doesn't matter, but relative to the game does matter. He spends a lot of time looking at real-world guns, often pulling up a forgotten weapons video or some other clip from gun YouTube, while he works. But these videos are more for artistic inspiration than technical reference. He's got the 3D model of the spotter's wrist-mounted dart gun on his monitor, running the loading/firing animation and wiggling his mouse around to pick apart individual components. If you look real close at how all of these parts fit together, nothing would work in real life, but that's not really what I'm going for here. You might think of each animated component as a little performer in a choreographed dance. Each little part needs to tell you, the player, about what's happening. The gun is activating, rounds are being loaded into the chamber, the weapon is ready to fire. It's about symbolism, not true function. Visual dazzle and crisp expressive animations and sound design are much more effective ways to communicate this than whatever might be most realistic. I think that's true for the most part, and certainly wouldn't be true in a more realistic game though. We talked about this a while back in the world of sound design, which I think I'll probably link that article. I believe this is just the sound design article. Harvesting sounds. Okay. The classic example there is taking a sword out of a sheath. In real life, it's basically silent, but it's a lot cooler if you give it that shling sound effect you hear in games and movies. Yes, it is. If you make something and you omit that sound effect, you're a pretentious bastard. At the end of the day, all these design considerations boil down to creating the gun that feels right, not the one that's technically correct. Again, Casper points to the rule of cool. A lot of times, games will have all of these cool fantasy guns, and there's always guys in the YouTube comments being like, this gas system doesn't make sense, or whatever. Who cares, man? It's sci-fi. Let's just have some fun with it. As long as it does actually feel cool. And you have to ride that very fine line, I think, where going to the point of just such obvious unrealism or surrealism can become uncool, but at the same time, tying yourself down to realism is not going to lead to something cool either. You have to ride the line. You have to understand that it exists somewhere in the middle of realism and absurdism is where cool really lies, I think. Anyway, want more road call? We're premiering a brand new trailer at the Triple I Initiative on April 10th. Hope to see you there. I will link the... I think I'll have to link something in the description for that. Probably won't be like everything. It'll probably just be the Triple I website, I think. Anyway, yeah, as always, if you want to let him know what you'd like to see next. Anyway, I think that was an absolutely fantastic Below Decks post. So once again, thank you, Aaron, for just continuing to keep these flowing. They are... Why would I put that on screen? Oh, I didn't. Sorry, I didn't. I just switched to my email tab, like just to take a glance at it. And I didn't realise I'd actually taken the window browser off. That's fine. Anyway, yeah, I think it's actually a fantastic one. I really loved how it got into sort of what all of the 4 current classes represent, what they are as characters, how designing these powers and abilities goes, as far as like a artistic exercise and what philosophies go into that. I think it's great stuff. I really enjoyed it, and as far as if I want to make any suggestion about future Below Decks, it's kind of just more stuff like this, but for other parts of the game. Like, explain this process when it comes to enemies, maybe specifically for boss fights, maybe also specifically for creating more DRG machinery, weapons, a future one for cosmetics, basically everything. But I just think the approach of this article is perfect. The actual sort of format and style of the writing. But I'd just like to see it for pretty much every aspect possible of Rocore. But yeah, that's kind of all there is to this Below Decks. Obviously, we'll talk a bit about what was covered here on Saturday in the podcast. And of course, talk about what we want to see from the trailer next week, which, as I've already explained, I won't be there for. So we will be publishing a trailer breakdown video the week after. It will still be less than a week after the trailer comes out, but it will not be immediately after the trailer comes out. So just stand by for that. I think we'll make it worth your while, because it's definitely going to be a longer trailer breakdown than what anyone else is going to put out. I can tell you that much. But until then, thanks always for watching. If you enjoyed this, please make sure to like and subscribe. If you want to see more stuff like this, then please also click the bell. Well, you want to see more stuff like this and stay on top of everything to do with Deep Rock and Rocore, then also click the bell. But yeah, I'll see you next time, baby.